Okay, here we're going sound-wise, and here we're going video, and
That don't look bad.
we're just here to chat.
Just here to chat.
Yeah, you know why we're here, right? You remember what we're
For
doing
the
today?
purpose of chatting.
Yeah, because I blindfolded you, put you in my trunk, and brought you here against
And
your
said,
will
Let's chat.
to talk about the thylacine. just kidding, none of that happened. But I don't know, how do we start these things?
Welcome to the Mystery Squad podcast.
First
Episode
one ever. Episode 1.
Kind of a freestyle, like no predetermined topic, but we're just gonna kind of see where it takes us.
Well, and probably in the future we won't be in the same location. We just happened to be this week that we were launching it. So in the future we'll be doing kind of over Zoom and everything. So enjoy the production quality. It's the only one you're gonna get like this. Just kidding. We'll see what happens in the future. But yeah, Cole and I have known each other a long time. I don't know how much we want to get into like the history, because we will talk about that stuff.
Sure.
We've been on a lot of adventures. We've looked for tons of mysteries around the world, actually. I think we've been on more trips, you and me, than kind of with any of our other friends that have helped us in the Mystery Squad
More
world.
than I've done solo.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
So we just kind of wanted to start. You may have noticed that the intro video we made a long time ago. We've been trying to get this off the ground for a long time, haven't found the way, and we decided a podcast would be the best way. So
Yeah.
that's what's up with that. And today we're going to talk about the thylacine.
That's right. So when I said no predetermined topic, I was lying.
Lying
on
through
accident.
his teeth to you.
Because I forgot.
Not realizing we definitely predetermined what we're going to talk about today. But we can talk about anything we want.
For
This
sure.
is the
'Cause
Mystery
stuff
Squad.
will come up.
Yeah. So yeah, the thylacine, we're talking about it today because it's important for a lot of reasons. One of them being we went searching for it in Tasmania last year in August.
Yep.
And we want to talk about that story a little bit, but mostly we just want to kind of reminisce about that and give you guys an introduction to Mystery Squad. So we're going to stop talking to you and start talking to each other like podcasts actually do, right?
I believe that is the case.
Hopefully that didn't blow out the sound when I did that. Oh, it didn't. Anyway, Cole, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man.
Yeah.
Real good. Feeling good. How are you?
Good. So August, right?
Yep.
That's when we went.
Mm-hmm.
You remember? Let's talk a little bit about obviously you remember the trip.
I remember.
But let's talk a little bit about the why did we go and how did that work out? Because we were talking for years about wanting to look for the thylacine.
Totally. So thylacine's been on our radar in a big way for quite some time because it's not just iconic. It's not just like poster child for conservation, failure of conservation, cryptids, a whole bunch of conversations. It's also just one of the most likely to still be around and just be really reclusive. And, we've been 85 years without a confirmed sighting, but there have been real good sightings that like you can confirm, like you can be pretty certain that they were real, including footprint casts, video recordings, some photos, which are pretty sweet, but hard to say with photos.
Yeah, and we heard some first-hand accounts of sightings, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
They kind of bolstered our idea that hey, this thing could totally still be alive. It hasn't even been 100 years since the last one died in the Hobart Zoo, 1936. And I guess I should say I did make a video on just all the background information about the thylacine. We'll probably talk a lot about that, but maybe we'll put a link in there
It's a good
for
idea.
easy reference, and maybe some other links that for research you can just look up. But the thylacine, like you said, is a poster child.
Totally.
There's a lot of animals that have gone extinct recently because of not even recently, humans have kind of been extincting animals for thousands of years.
For sure.
This is nothing new. We've just kind of stepped it up, and it's happening at a more accelerated rate. So, yeah, the thylacine has just been, for some reason, one that has captured the imaginations of a lot of people, especially because it didn't have to die. Mm-hmm. Much like the Tasmanian devil, it could still be around, and it was one of the coolest, most beautiful animals. I mean, it was a marsupial wolf, which seems like a fictional thing, and it was just such a cool part of the ecosystem of that part of the world. But again, the thylacine died out in 1936. It died out in Australia 4,000 years ago because of the introduction of the dingo by indigenous people that lived there. And so its story has kind of been dwindling for a long time until supposedly it died in 1936, right? But there's a lot of good reason why it didn't actually die in 1936. And like you were saying, those sightings. So anyway, a little bit of the backstory. We have always wanted to go to Tasmania. It's a big trip, so it was always like, you know, a far-flung future goal of ours. Yeah. And for some reason last year, it just lined up.
It did.
It just became a reality, and we kind of, I think you mostly looked at the tickets and found them, and then you send them to me. And so like over the course of like, 6 months, we purchased them bit by bit, which helped us financially to be able to do it instead of all at once. We just kind of budgeted it out of our paychecks over the 6 months. And then obviously there were the costs of being in Tasmania, but those were pretty low compared to like what we'd already paid for. So that was also just a smart way to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really feels like fate. Like it really always felt like someday we're going to get to Tasmania.
Right.
And then it was like the universe was like, cool, it's time now. Let's do this thing. And
it was kind of always a conversation of like, are we going to do that next year? Are we going to do that like 2 years from now? And for some reason at the beginning of 2023, like February maybe, it was just like, I can't remember what all was going on, but Thylacine had like kind of reinserted itself into like top priority status on our radar for some reason.
I think Forrest Galante was a big part of that.
Yeah,
he posted a lot of stuff about it, and we watched a lot of that.
And so we just like, because it felt right, we're like started seriously entertaining the idea of going later in that same year. And that was really all the impetus we needed. And once we like looked into it, it's like, okay, this is how we can afford it. This is when we can afford it. This is when we can schedule it, like with our different schedules and stuff.
Yeah. And it was just cool. Like I said, it really felt like the universe paved the way. And that's how a lot of our projects have been. Cole and I have collaborated on a lot of like film projects and adventurous things and all sorts of different stuff. And it kind of feels like it happens when it's supposed to, much like this podcast.
Totally.
We were roommates for 3 years and friends for much longer than that. And now that we don't live together, we're finally doing a podcast.
So, okay, this Mystery Squad project, the basis is let's talk about, deal with, investigate some of those mysteries that are most interesting to us. And that is historical mysteries, you know, supernatural mysteries, just anything that boggles our minds. Let's talk about those things. Let's investigate those things. And we didn't really know what foot to lead out with, like how to go about it. So we just kind of like never did much about it. But the idea of starting a podcast only came up after we were not even living in the same state. Yeah. Unfortunately, but probably it was also just the right time for it as well.
Yeah. And, you know, for some reason we haven't, like we've been on many more adventures than we have like talked about. So like the cool thing about this podcast is we're going to be able to talk about, you know, not just our time in Tasmania and Australia, but our time in Ireland and England and Scotland and the Ukraine. And when we drove to Cancun and some of the little micro adventures around the U.S. where we've just sort of gone treasure hunting and investigated Western mysteries and a whole bunch of other stuff. So like, yeah, if it's a mystery, it's something within the realm of the Mystery Squad. And I think that in our intro video, it talks about hauntings and UAPs and, we need to do a Area 51 episode. No spoilers. But just get ready for that. I forgot about that whole adventure. Right, so I'm excited for this podcast. But anyway, it feels like we're not just two dudes sitting around talking about stuff, even though we are. We're two dudes sitting around talking about stuff that have also been on Area 51. And have been in temples in Mexico and stuff like that, you know?
We want to use this as a way to like debrief people on our adventures and just hash them out ourselves. Because like we talk about it, but it's nice to have a record of what we talk about. So
totally. And to maybe one day, if it takes off, have more of them.
Totally.
And finance those and actually take you guys with us to these other, because we have footage from all these things that we can make videos out of, and but not a lot. So we want to have more in the future where we have specific Mystery Squad sanctioned adventures where we record as much as we can. And you guys can be a part of that by liking, subscribing, and putting on the notification thing and sharing with your friends. That's supposed to come at the end, right? When we do that.
So you do it whenever.
Whenever you want. Because we do what we want on this channel.
We do what we want.
So yeah, that's kind of the history, if you followed any of that, and it was coherent in any way. So we've been friends a long time. We love mysteries. Cole accidentally broke a mausoleum one time to pieces in Scotland. You know, we get out there. We'll tell that story later. I don't know why I brought that up. I just wanted to spring it on you.
Yeah, extreme relevance.
There's been
why it came
stuff.
Up.
So Tasmania. Yeah, so we prepared for the trip. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the preparation that you did, just like research-wise, for like why we chose the location we did and stuff?
For sure. Yeah, so there are some pretty good records of sightings of living thylacine, purportedly, that have occurred since the date of the last known living specimen. And if you plot those, which people have, I can't remember what organization did it, but I think it was something that was commissioned by the Tasmanian government. But there's a nice plotted out map that shows in clusters where these sightings have taken place and in what time periods and stuff.
Yeah.
And looking at that, there are a few places of concentration. One of them is in the northwest of the island, and that's largely because much of the northwest, really much of the west of Tasmania, is utterly wild. The northwest specifically has some protected, like national park status sort of areas that are pretty dense wood, actually.
Yeah, very, very, very low population, like more so than you would think. And I think that's something people don't realize about Tasmania is they're like, well, people are there, they would have seen them. And it's like, once you get to Tasmania, you can understand.
Oh, totally.
And we'll talk about that. But yeah, very, very low population in those areas.
So looking at this, the wilderness in the northwest there, they refer to as the Thylacine. Looking at that, and more specifically looking at really untouched national park areas inside of that, and noting that there were sightings within that region, it made sense to us to just focus on that area. Also, you're going to hear us talking a lot about like what we feel like. This feels right. It felt right to do that. And that's played a big part in our decision making in adventures and stuff and investigations. And it's just because, like, I mean, take it for what you will, but I don't think feelings should be utterly ignored. I think they have a value as like a data point just to be taken into consideration. Anyway, that was part of the decision making in the region we chose. Now, more specifically, taking into account that the Tasmanian native hen, which is a small grounded rail species, that it was supposed to be the main food source in the wild for thylacine. We also kind of overlaid a map of like distribution of native hen on the island. Overlaid it with the sightings plotted on the map. And what we found is there's this nice spot of overlap in, what was the name of the national park?
Savage River.
Savage River National Park. There's an area where the native hen population kind of tapers, it kind of feathers out, and that intersects with like the north of this national park.
Get it?
And the innermost part of this national park, it has no facilities. It has no trails. It's entirely wild. You can access it if you purchase a parks pass, but it's dense. There's no accommodations. The nearest you can get to it is there's a road that goes around the outside of it, so you can pull up to it and then you just trek through the woods. Anyway, the point is a low density of native hen population bordered up to the north part of that national park. And so we thought to ourselves, thylacine are not likely to be where no native hen is observed to be, because then they'd have to, find some other prey source that's not as ideal. They're not likely to be where there's an overabundance of native hen, because that suggests nothing is predating on them. So we thought that in between area where it's kind of mitigated the population, that's where they are most likely to be, because it could suggest that they are being actively hunted. and for that to overlap with some of the most dense wild on the whole island, that looked really good to us. So that was kind of the meat and potatoes of like why we chose that area.
And a lot of sightings too that were documented in that area as well, which is like, it's more in the wild areas that they kind of are on the outskirts of it. So also when he says trek through the woods, we'll get to this later. But if you're imagining a trek through the woods, you're not imagining correctly what we went through in Tasmania, because like this is like the densest, most primeval jungle I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've seen jungle.
Yeah.
I've been out there into the jungle, and this was just like crazy dense. And it was like, yes, it was forest, it was jungle, it wasn't tropical. It was, what do they call it again?
Yeah, temperate rainforest.
Temperate rainforest.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like if you took the United States Pacific Northwest and times all the plant life by like 50 in density.
And included a bunch of species that predate the Ice Age.
Ancient species. That is. Yeah. They literally have this type of like tree called horizontal because it grows horizontally and will like make false floors of the jungle that aren't even really, like they can be on top of a cliff, and that's why people used to like fall through. They'd be really dangerous. Yeah. The horizontal was like the early miners that went exploring would just disappear because they'd fall through. Yeah. And like crazy stuff out there. And I remember it because, you know, we'll get to this, but when we first got to Tasmania, because we're here now in the conversation, we got there at night and drove straight to the Savage River, which was how many hours away from the Launceston?
It was like 2.5 hours from Launceston
airport. And so we're just driving along the road. We saw so many dead animals. Oh, yeah. That's something that we do have to say. Man. Unfortunately, Tasmania lives up to its name as the roadkill capital of the world. Mm-hmm. And on the one hand, it's because there's so much wildlife there, which is good. Which is nice. But on the other hand, the cars run over them all the time. Like literally every car is outfitted what's called a rhubarb. They're outfitted with what is called a rhubarb, specifically because there's so many animals that they hit. It was really sad.
And the people drive like maniacs. There are posted speed limits, and we were driving a reasonable speed compared to the speed limit. People just blare by, and there are these narrow intercity roads. Like, it's nuts. And it's no wonder that people just obliterate animals all over the country roads on that island.
But like possums and patamelons, which is like a tiny kangaroo, and wallabies.
Must have seen, I kid you not, 10 days on the island. And we did plenty of driving, mind you. We probably saw upwards of 200 dead patamelons on the side of the road.
Just that one animal. Yeah. Thankfully we didn't see any dead wombats, but we did actually. Oh. I think we just like saw lumps of animal that we couldn't identify. Yeah. Some of them were statistically speaking, some of them were probably wombats, unfortunately. Yeah. We did see a wombat on the side of the road that we went up and got to like get real close to.
I thought they would be.
Yeah, all the other animals are a little more skittish. Yeah. But anyway, we drive through the night. We get to the Savage River. We have this road that we're going to try to get into this kind of. We named it the Atlas Plateau. That was the name of the place. We decided we could say that, right?
Oh, for sure.
We weren't going to be secret about this location just in case, but that was the area within the Savage River National Reserve or whatever national park. It was called the Atlas Plateau is what we named it because the Atlas River goes through it, and that name was also significant for us, Atlas, which we might get into later. But that's in line with what Cole was talking about. Like you just have a feeling about things sometimes, and you need to give credence to those. They shouldn't rule everything in all of your decisions, but you should listen. It should remain a data point, as he was saying. But anyway, we're trying to get there, and it's very obvious that some of the roads in the map do not exist anymore, or never existed,
or are impassable by like a car.
Yeah,
but they're still
because they're washed out, and it's just the mud, or giant trees have fallen. Yeah. I mean, we lifted up tons of trees, and some of them we drove over.
We got past some trees that were surprising.
We did. We drove over a tree one time.
We had a pretty rental car too. This thing was not a beast.
We were the first users of this rental car. I think we were the very first ones who ever used it, and it was certainly used after we used it.
We returned it looking pretty good.
Yeah, if they didn't look too close, it probably looked pretty good. But anyway, we like go into this, these roads, and we just immediately understand, oh, this is a different level of habitat, jungle, impassability here. And man, do you remember just being there and being like, in the dark of the night, straight into this jungle, hearing the kookaburra, hearing just a million animals at once. Sounds that sound like dinosaurs. Yeah, man. It sounds like you're in the middle of again, a primeval forest. And then we're just like, well, we're just going to kick it in the car. Yeah. And we sleep that night hoping we don't get eaten by some force of nature. And thankfully, we weren't really scared of predators because the biggest one we were searching for.
Yeah, totally.
Like literally the biggest predator on the island we were looking for.
You got a bunch of grass eaters on the island besides that.
Yeah. But kookaburras sound crazy. There's a reason why they put them in every single jungle scene in every single movie ever made, because it's one of the craziest sounds ever. I love it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And to hear it in person.
Oh, yeah.
Man, that was something else. And so we get out in the morning. We just start to search for where that road was, and we see that there's a bridge that used to probably exist. We don't know how long ago. It was there on the map. It was certainly not there anymore. We could see where it used to be.
Yeah, there were like pylons going
totally across the river.
Yeah.
Huge river.
Yeah.
Humongous river. And we're like, well, we can't get past there. We're going to have to replot our way to the Atlas Plateau. But we still feel strongly about getting there. And so we spent the whole next day trying this road and trying that road, and like, can we squeeze through these trees or over that tree? Can we make it on this crazy decline through the mud of that log? You remember the logging thing?
Oh my gosh.
That we barely made it through full speed through this mud, slipping and sliding.
We have taken
in the rental car.
We have taken some chances with rental cars before, but like that is the only time I thought we were actually gonna lose a rental car.
I got a pretty cool shot of Cole's face in the rearview mirror though, as he was like harried going through the mud. So in the documentary someday.
And it's also like not just, damaging the car was a consideration, but had we gotten stuck in any of those areas, no one was
miles
out
and
there.
miles and miles.
I mean,
no service,
we didn't have
nothing.
service.
Yeah.
It would have been awful to try to get out of that.
Just nothing. Nobody's coming for you. Can't even call for help. We have to trek out for miles and miles and miles and miles. Maybe
probably
even
could have gotten a hold of the loggers like on Monday.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was, so that was crazy. But we had taken, like, we knew what we were dealing with in this situation. And this is something that's really interesting about once you've been on a lot of these sort of kind of crazy adventures, is that you do kind of understand where your limits are, and you start to make calculated risks. Because if you're going to discover anything, if you're really going to go out there and be a pioneer in any sort of way, you got to take risks. But unfortunately, a lot of people take risks that are like, they overestimate their ability to do that. And I feel like we were much more that way when we were younger.
Sure. And we've gotten close to the line many times in recent years.
Way too close to the line.
You like learn immediately that that's what's going on.
Yeah, and thankfully we have avoided most, like, well, we've obviously avoided dying. We've never died, which is great. We've come outrageously close, probably more times than we should have.
Yeah.
But what's cool about that is we learned in this, we just, even though it was kind of like crazy, a lot of the moments, it never felt out of control. There were so many moments that we could have sat back and been like, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
But instead we're like, cool, how do we solve this problem?
Yeah.
Like getting over that one tree, we drove over a tree somehow, and we're like, okay, can we cut through it? Can we move it? No, this is thousands and thousands of pounds. Can we go a different direction? Can we just like going through all of the different options until we realized, okay, if I jump on it at the right moment, it can move just enough that the tire will grab it to pull it over. And somehow we got over that tree. Yeah. It was insane.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like the main base. It was like the branches that stuck up that I could jump, because the main base was so huge. Yeah. We couldn't move it at all. But that was kind of cool to see that, like, after all of our learning in Mexico and in the Yucatan and in Europe and in Ukraine and everything that we had done so far, we just could rely on those skills. Like, we realized that when, like, it got tough, the skills were there that we had developed, which was a really cool thing.
Yeah, because you run into a wall quite often where you're like, I did not anticipate this. Also, I don't think we can get past this. And sometimes it's like, if you take 30 seconds away from the anxiety, then something new comes to you. You're like, well, I'm at least going to try this, because what else am I going to do?
Totally.
Like, I don't have other options.
And we did get into a lot of situations in which there just was nobody coming to save us. There was nothing that was immediately obvious. And we're like, cool, for all intents and purposes, we're absolutely dead in the water. But we found our way through every single one of those, which was incredible.
Yeah.
Which was super cool.
Blessed for sure.
I'm just making sure. I'm getting low battery warning, so I just want to make sure it's still recording. I think that might be a iPad low battery.
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
I think we're good.
Cool.
But as long as the light's on the thing, we're good.
Nice.
So anyway, yeah, that was a cool part to just see, like, where our ability was. Anyway, so we did get to the Atlas Plateau.
Yeah, we get there. That's after, like he said, we spent a whole day looking for our way in, didn't find it. So by that night we find our most likely access point and we park there to camp. So we're near, and our next day is getting to the plateau itself. And I think we'll leave it there. And
we will talk about that in part 2 of this story. And that was good timing.